All right, everybody. So we're gonna talk about practice management again, but now we're gonna focus more in the contracts that NCAR recommends. One is the B101, and the other one is the C401. You guys can see my screen. Everybody can see my screen. We're good. All right. So these two are required and actually outlined as part of the practice management exam because again, in order to be able to run a practice, you have to effectively mitigate, contractual obligations and also consultant contractual obligations too, not just with the owner directly, but also with your consultants and what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. Um, I always speak about that because our services don't start until we have a signed contract, a signed proposal, right? So that's where we know, what we're doing, by when we're doing it, and a little bit about why we're doing it. I mean, those are sometimes our internal motives and things like that, but um, and those things are not optional. So we have to meet those deadlines. We have to meet those scope requirements and things like that. That's our contract, right? It's like you asking for a burger and getting a burger, right? The contract is I would like you to make me a burger. And you say yes, I will make a burger for $5, then you gotta deliver it, right? So whatever that is. Um, Now, why do we have B101 and C41? Like what's that? Every firm has their own contracts, but the American Institute of Architects has created some standard contracts that we pay for to use, and they're licensed. And nowadays, it's getting so sophisticated that they have an application where you just fill out the name of the client, fill out the project information, and they automatically issue a contract for you. The American Institute of Architects has been around for, I don't know, over 100 years. And they started with contracts created for contractors and owners. Why? Because most disputes began between contractors and homeowners, and they wanted to mitigate those issues. So that's why A101 is for contractor and owner and not, architect and owner. You would actually, it would make sense as architects that the A would stand for architect, but it doesn't. It has nothing to do with it. It's the first contract that they created. Little bit of history for that, for you, but it has nothing to do with the architect. The A101 is just between the owner and the contractor, and it was to mitigate that. Then they created the B101 all the way back, and that's the contract between the owner and the architect. And of course, they also created the C401, and they're like a family of contracts. They're all kind of interconnected, intertwined, and referenced from one to the other. Um, there is also another company, another institution, the Construction Specification Institute, creates their own contracts that are complementary to each other within themselves. Would you want to combine a B101 with their contract from the Construction Specification Institute? No, you don't want to do that because they don't relate. They don't use the same terms. They might use the same terms and be defined differently. So you don't want to do any of that stuff. Now, long story short, the American Institute of Architects issues and creates and updates the standard contracts that we use in our industry. Um, and NCARB and the AIA are kind of connected. So NCARB is testing us as to how competent we are as it relates in this section to in this part to mitigating and managing contracts and writing contracts and editing contracts. So and the American Institute of Architect is the one that issues them. So they're kind of complementary. So going back to that, I'm going to open up this document right here that I've also referenced before. It is outdated. I mean, it's 2015 contract relationships, but it does outline what we're talking about. And I go for the sake of helping you out. I'm going to explain it a little bit more. So there is this contract called the A201, which is required for us to understand for practice management and know how to execute it for project management and construction evaluation and project development and documentation to some extent as well. For this one, just understanding it is important. I wouldn't want you to memorize it or any of that for practice management. I want you to understand it, carefully. For project management and construction evaluation, I want you to know it like the palm of your hands. Understand everything. So what is the A201? So the A201 is the general conditions. Like is not a contract on its own. It's actually just a terms and condition type of element that explains what the contractor is supposed to do during construction, what the architect is supposed to do during construction, what the owner is supposed to do during construction. So this little diagram represents those relationships regarding the A201 and other contracts. So all of the alphanumeric elements that you see, like C103, C41, are contracts, and they are representing who has the contract with who. So C41 represents a contract between an architect and a consultant. A consultant could be a structural engineer, a plumbing engineer, a mechanical engineer, an interior designer also, and so forth and so on. So that's what that represents. And C103 is a contract between a consultant and the owner, um, that the owner has his own separate consultant that they hire. It's not one that we hire. Um, so, and then inside this circle, so outside this circle, we have all the consultant contracts. They do not link, let's say, like this C41 is between the architect and the consultant, but they have nothing to do with this guy. Particularly, they're more towards the person that they have the contract with, but the A201 establishes a relationship between all of the parties that are here. You see how the A201 almost touches everybody? It does not touch the subs and sub consultants. Why? Because it's really mainly issued for the architect, owner, and contractor, right? Um, and the C41 and A41, which is one for the subs and one, for the consultants, establishes certain requirements that those guys gotta do in relationship to the A201 for their prime contractors. So the prime, like for instance, here's a prime contract. A prime contract is a contract between the the architect has the prime contract with the owner, and the consultant has a subcontract with the architect. So just be familiar with the term prime. Prime is the main contract that there is. So long story short, the A201 establishes the rules of the game for construction, right? Why everybody's supposed to do and so forth. These contracts that you see here outlined are different variations of the B101. The B101 is kind of like the standard contract that the AIA has issued for architects and owners, but there are others. The B103 is for like a different type of project. Some of them are for bigger projects, smaller projects, medium projects, some with sustainability initiatives involved, or green practices involved, or LEED certified, things like that. There are different contracts depending on the size of the job. And then all the A series right here, they all begin with the A101, but then there are variations of them, some for bigger, smaller, medium, and so forth. Okay, so that's what they mean, and those are the rules of the game also. Now you see how there are solid lines between one and the other, and there's dash lines. So there's this area called the surety. The surety is a company that bonds the contractor. They are like an insurance company that bonds the contractor for the cost of the project. Should the contractor not be able to finish the job, the insurance company will step in and pay the difference to get a new contractor. So that's why there's a reference, because it is for the owner. Like indirectly, it's for the owner, but it's really to step in for the contractor. Now, I don't want to get into a lot of the minutiae of these right now, but I'm just letting you know there are these contracts, and they are between the parties involved in the job, and there are things that one party is supposed to do as it relates to the other. And that gives you the big picture of the game, all right, on all the main players in the game. Now, this is for a design bit build. There is this thing called delivery methods, and I'm going to explain that more in detail as we proceed, but there are different delivery methods. So we got design bit build, then there's other delivery methods, or another one called construction manager as advisor. Then there's another one called construction manager as constructor. We also have the design build. We have, multiple primes and multiple projects and things like that. So these are some. There's another one called integrated project delivery, IPD, right here. And I want you to be familiar with these diagrams, understand what they mean, like really dig into them and be like, okay, so I am the architect. Here I am. And I have a contract with my consultant. That doesn't change. It's still the C401. Now be curious. Why do I have a little star here? I don't know what that means. So we got to look into what that footnote means. You know, if AIA document 441 TM or C401 is to be used on the project transition form, blah, blah, blah. Just try to understand what that means. Then I don't have the standard B101 with the owner. I have another one. But what's the difference here? That everybody has a contract together. They all kind of form an entity together right here. And instead of the A201, we have a A295. All right. And understand what is the IPD? Really, what is that? Now, this version, I'm sorry, is a transitional document. But then there is this one. This is the one I really want you to picture. Everybody is in one place. This is the real integrated project delivery contract. Everybody has a contract together. All right. And then the subs are outside consultants, but we have the prime contracts are owner, architect, and contractor, and they form a single entity together, like forming a company. They form a company together to do this project. And there is this word called "we're in this together." And if there is a win, everybody wins. If there's a loss, everybody loses. So that's this, and it's more and more promoted in the industry these days. So does this clarify a little bit about I go for you? All I want you to get from here is there's these contracts that are issued by the AIA, and there are different contracts for different type of projects, and there are different delivery methods, and we'll get into what those things mean more in detail. But you understand those things so far. So with that being said, we're gonna jump into the B101. The B101 document contract looks like this. Again, it has the AIA, written very bold and big out there, and this is a trademark. This is a license, just like a Revit license or anything like that, to use this contract. Me, a flow design architect, we don't use the B101. We don't use the AIA contracts. We use industry standardized terms and conditions for our contracts that we have bulletproofed ourselves by trial and error. We started with a contract that was drafted by another partner, and we've been editing it as we go. But I don't want you to think about like I go. You happen to work a flow too. What we do a flow is separate from what this is being what this is done. Now we can talk about the differences and why certain things are here and certain things are not. The major difference is this is a 23 pages contract, and I think you've seen the flow contract are not 23 pages. They're probably 3 or 4 pages. That's it. And there's some that are 1 page. Why? Because if I show my homeowner a B101 contract like this, and before they even try to hire me, they're gonna run away and be like, "Nope, you're crazy. I'm not reading that." To do a little bathroom addition, I'm not doing that. So we've made it a little bit more. We've made a contract that's more cohesive and user friendly, for our clients. Um, it does have some of these provisions in there, meaning it's not the same word by word, but the idea of the provision is to protect the firm and the owner and be fair to everybody. So we have a fair agreement here. So going through that now, before I go too far on that, then there is a commentary that I have told people to read as well. The AIA has created a commentary, and it is a document like this. This is even bigger. This is 41 pages, but it goes article by article. Like if we go cover page, it says, okay, cover page is that. This is what it says. The left is the explanation. The right is the actual article as for the actual contract, and explains it on a little more user friendly, dumbed down, Darwin proved for stupidity, version of it, so that we all kind of get it. It is still very, very difficult though. Anybody has any input on that? It's still kind of tough to understand what they're talking about here because it gets then too wordy. This is This is very complicated, simplified, but then this is way too wordy. I don't know what you guys think. You can leave the comments below on our YouTube channel. But going back to these, we're gonna go through these as much as we can today, and I'm gonna try to be rapid speed. Things that go in a contract. Dates are critical. Who is the contract written between? Like, is it written between such and such and such and such? Information about the project and addresses, like who's the address, what's the address, things like that. A contract without a date and without names, it's not a contract. I mean, it's just a blank piece of paper. Um, Now, I will also urge you to listen to Mike Hanahan's lecture. He is better at it than me because he's both an architect and an attorney. So he gets it a little bit. He knows it more than me. That lecture is on that folder, I believe, Igo, that we have shared with everybody. So you can listen to it. So going through this. So, the contract is dated, and then is between the architect's client identified as the owner, and they write the legal name, status, address, and other information, and then the architect, and then for what project. So you got to write a name, location, and detailed description of the project, and that's that page number one. And then in the contract we have this table of articles, right? And it's kind of like a table of content, but they call it articles. um So Article 1 is initial information. And by the way, here Flow, I don't know if you've seen that on on files in, there is a thing called clients. And then I always put, whenever you work with me or anybody works with me, I write initial information. And that's really the initial inquiry on my firm. It's the initial inquiry. Like, hey, Darwin, I would like a 3-story building, such and such, blah, blah, like that, the initial information. I use that. In the AIA, they define what the initial information is and what they want it to be. It is pretty much what I will get to start a project. It's what I will get to be able to write a proposal in the first place. Then Article 2, architect responsibilities. Article 3, scope of architect's basic services. So there's basic services, and then there's additional services and supplemental services and so forth. Supplemental and additional services is Article 4. 5 is owner responsibilities. 6 is cost of the work. 7 is copyrights and licenses. 8 is claims and disputes. 9 is termination or suspension. 10 is miscellaneous provisions. 11 is compensation. 12 is special terms and conditions. And 13 is scope of the agreement. We're going to go through all of those different things one by one. So, Article 1, and everybody can see the screen. I hope everybody can see the screen all good. So I'm going to actually zoom in a little bit and hide some of these things so that we can see it better. So, and I'm going to go quick. Like I said, if you have any questions, you can just type them up or email them to me, and I'll answer them on the next session. Um, if you have a question that's like urgent, like, oh my goodness, I really need to know this because I'm not getting it. I really need to read this. You can just, raise your hand. There's a thing called raise your hand on the Zoom meeting, or just send a message. I'm going to see it and it's going to pop up. So Article 1, initial information. Section 1.1. This agreement is based on the initial information set forth in section 1.1. Interesting. It is just saying the basis of this agreement is everything that is provided in that initial information. Now, anybody knows why this is important, and I might not be able to go as fast as I want to, but I just want to make sure this is clear. Why is it important to even say that this agreement is based on the initial information?
Because you might have discussed something earlier and that's on the agreement, and then the client might say, no, this is not what I said before. Like, probably to be on the same page. Does it make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I know what you're trying to say. So what you're trying to say is, here, if you've asked for apples, we're designing apples. We're dealing with apples right here. And all of these refers to those apples. And now protecting, the clear, I think there's a saying in Spanish, Mientras más claridad, mejor amistad. It's like the clearer, the better the friendship. I don't know if there's anything like that in English, but I'm just saying. So the clearer things are, the better the friendship, the better the relationship. So here we want to make sure that people are all on the same page. I'll tell you right now, I deal with dozens of contracts a week, dozens of clients a week. So sometimes I forget even what I said, and clients do forget too. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Lately, I've been recording. I say, hey, is it okay if I even record this initial meeting that we have right now? And they're like, yeah, sure. Why? Because we don't even know what's going on. We don't know what we're doing. Like, it's just too much. Life is getting very complicated. So I want to record it and make it easy. I also want to make sure that the team gets it. So if the team here gets what I'm getting, we can discuss. And sometimes we all sit down and say, is it apples that the client really wanted, or was it pears? Well, it sounds like pears. And we email the client and say, hey, it looks like you wanted pears, but you say apples. Is that right? Sorry that I'm using this synonym, like this metaphor, but it's just trying to make things clear. So this helps us with change orders and scope creep. This is a term, scope creep, spelled CREEP, is when things are getting outside what it is that they were supposed to be, and they're getting into change order or additional services ground. um, we don't want to burn the budget. There's another term, burning the fee, burning the budget, meaning we have already spent all the time allotted for the project, and we haven't finished the project. Sorry, Siri is getting in the way. Siri, be quiet. So we're getting ahead of the scope, beyond the scope, and well, we should be entitled to additional services compensation, or compensation for that additional work. Now, how do we know that? There are like a lot of firms, I'm telling you right now, that don't even manage that stuff. Like they don't even manage that they were supposed to do X or Y and Z. And I'll tell you why. Because they haven't been able to break down what their services are all about, and what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. So their staff members are all working on autopilot. Oh yeah, we're gonna do sections, elevations, perspective, renderings, blah blah blah, this and that, and this and that. And the client says, yeah, I want a garage, and they put a garage, and then they say, oh, the client wants a full master bedroom now too. And they keep doing it, and they're excited with the design, and they don't know that they're on additional services work. I mean, here at Flow, everybody should have a big sign that's like chon 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 whenever somebody's asking for something that the contract does not say it should be there. It should be also in your life, everybody here. And that, like, whenever you're writing this, you should know, hey, you're getting into additional services ground. So when do you know that? Initial information. Always, and your firms and respective firms in their folder structure, and this is also part of practice and project management. There should be a folder structure, and it should be a folder that says initial information or some sort of equivalent to that, where everything that you need to know to start the project is there. And the contract is just telling you, all contract is based on that. Section 1.1.1 says the owner's program for the project. So guess what? The owner is supposed to provide you with the program. Yeah, you heard it. The owner is supposed to provide you a list of programmatic spaces and relationship thereof that you're to use to create your design. Programming is a service. That is why there is a whole exam called programming and analysis, which some of you are going to be taking soon. So because that's a whole subject matter. Actually, there are people out there called programmers that's all they do. I'm not talking about computer programmers. That's another segment. But programmers, space needs and things like that, assessments and things like that. There are people that specialize on that, and that helps the owner be able to know that they need a project and what they actually need. And we quantify that, and we are able to actually create a project budget for construction documents, architectural services, and so forth for that program. So the owner is supposed to give you the program, okay? And again, it says insert owner's program. Identify documentation that establishes the owner's program or state the manner in which the program will be developed. If the owner does not give you a program, you can create another contract and say, hey, listen, before we get into this, let's do a programming assessment contract. Or you can actually include that as part of this contract and say, program will be developed by us as part of our project. And you're like, great, go for it. So that's the one thing. So at Flow, we have a four-step process, and step two is the program, basically. And the owner is supposed to give it to us. So we it's not supposed to, it must give it to us. We don't design until they give us a program. So then section 1.1.2, the project physical characteristics. I asked for that on my step 2. The program also includes the physical characteristics, but it may not. So in this case, 1.1, and I'm gonna stop referencing how we do it at my office. I want to make sure that you guys get how the AIA wants you to do it, how NCAR wants you to do it, so that we pass these exams. That's all we're here to do, pass these exams. I do illustrate for the sake of clarity. So 1.1.2 says the project physical characteristics. So this identify or describe pertinent information about the project physical characteristics such as size, location, dimensions, geotechnical reports, site boundaries, topographic surveys, traffic and utility status, availability of public and private utilities and services, legal description of the site, etc. For the most part, this is referring to a survey. Some people here call it a plot plan. It's what shows you what the project is all about when it comes to property. Here's the property. Here's the land. All right. So this section 1.1.2 is asking you for the land and everything that comes with it. Utilities, ponds. If there's issues with contamination, you want to know about. All of that is part of 1.1.2. Environmental studies, they call it ESA, environmental site assessments. Do you have any of those? I want to have them. Why? Because those trigger, I mean, it's obvious, guys, right? That will tell you where you put your building. Your topographic study tells you, well, no, there's water there. We're not going to put it there. You know, you see the topography. Also, the most very, very basic reason. Let's design it on the right lot. What if you design it on somebody else's property, right? How do you know that? You don't know that unless you're given a survey. So that's that, right? And the survey is a legal description of the land. There's some that are topographic, and there's some that are boundaries ones. There's this term called ALTA survey, which is part of the American Title Land Association surveys. They do, like, they have a requirement for what a survey should have, but there are different types. And then the geotechnical reports are, when the owner hires a geotechnical engineer to dig borings. They call it borings, BORINGs, I think, borings. So holes in the ground, and they pull out what the makeup of the ground is. And I can explain that later to you. Miranda is familiar with it. Actually, for programming, it's a very, very important item to know about. Why? Because, well, that tells you what your property has. If there is just a pond there with a lot of water, or there is or number one enemy in construction, I would say, is actually clay. You don't want clay anywhere near your property, or where you're gonna put your building. You got to know about it before you design. Okay. And if you're gonna design there, you got to know about it, because there's a difficulty to it, and there's a compensation with it. Remember the word reward and risk and reward. If a site is very complicated, you got to ideally be compensated for that. If the site is very simple, well, you're going to charge accordingly as well. So that's why we need to know that. So the program tells you how much would you designing. The 1.1.2 tells you where you're designing it, right? And then we're going to go to the third part, very important one, 1.1.3, the owner's budget for the cost of the work, for how much you are doing this project. Now, the owner's budget for the cost of the work is not your services, your cost of the work. It's not the architect's compensation. All right. So if you see $1 million here, or $2 million here, or $12 million here, that's not what the architect's making. Not at all. Not by a long shot. That's what it costs to, what the owner hopes that it will cost to build this thing, what the owner is hoping for, his vision of it. And we got to design by that. All right. We cannot design something that we know is going to exceed that amount, not rightfully knowing that. Okay. So, three critical things in here. And there's more. So, but these three are very, very important. I'm going to repeat it again. Owner's program outlines what you're designing. 1.1.2 designs where you're designing it. 1.1.3 says for how much you're designing it. 1.1.4 says by when. Okay. And I haven't really read it, but I'm telling you right now, those four things. There is this thing called triple constraints, but in this case, we got four constraints. So the 1.1.4 says the owner's anticipated design and construction milestone dates. When are we gonna have the design phase milestone dates? By when are we finishing schematic? By when are we finishing programming? If we're hired to do that, by when are we doing? By when are we hoping to do construction? Construction is gonna start. By when are we hoping, or is the owner hoping that substantial completion is gonna happen? And any other milestones. Okay, very very important. You see, now you kind of get why this is important. Why is it important to have a contract? Because we don't know what we're doing, where we're doing it, for how much we're doing it, and by when we're doing it. I don't even know if I repeated that twice. But again, by when are we doing it? That's very important. So because the contract needs to establish that. So you don't start any work at all until a contract is signed. So if you get a question like that, a contract needs to be signed. So then we go to section 1.1.5. The owner intends the following procurement and delivery method for the project. I spoke to you about delivery method before when I showed you the different types of diagrams showing the different relationships of the parties involved in the game. Well, guess what? That um, is very important. Uh, and I'm going to repeat everything again. So it's going to become a thing in your mind. Number one, what's the problem? Why are we designing? Number two, where are we designing it? What's the legal description of the land? Number three, for how much are we designing it? Number four, by when are we designing it? Number five, how is it going to be built? Sorry about that. The reason why we need to know how it's going to be built is because the design process changes depending on how it's going to be built. You guys have heard of the term fast track. Everybody? Yeah? No? Maybe? Well, a fast track project is a project that's done in different packages. Foundation drawings, boom, 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 boom. They get issued, they get sent. First floor plans, boom, boom, boom. Roof plans, they get issued, and framing plans. They get done in different packages. So imagine how crazy it is to be doing fast track projects because in a week you got to be issuing like five, six different packages for different contractors to begin working on that. That's a coordination nightmare. Very, 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 very crazy nightmare. So for us to be able to finish that project, like to do those drawings, we got to get compensated accordingly. It's a coordination nightmare. So if we're doing a design bid build, which is a traditional delivery method, it's a different set of parameters, a different set of rules. Why? Design bid build, like the name describes it, DBB. So you design it, right? Then you send out the drawings to bid. So your design process is pretty much controlled by you and by the deadline that you have created with the client. But you don't have contractors involved during the design process, at least not on the traditional design delivery method. But if then you send it out to bid, the contractor bids on the job. Typically, the lowest responsible bidder gets selected, and then they begin construction, and then you begin your construction administration services. Different delivery method, different game, different set of parameters. So, and then you don't even use you use the A201 for this type, but if there's another type of contract, maybe you might not use the A201, there's another contract. So how we're gonna get this project built, and not we, but meaning the owner, because it's his project, will trigger a different set of contractual obligations for us. So we gotta know how this is gonna be built and by who is gonna be built. I ask that all the time. For homeowners, although I do, high-rise buildings, all kinds of things. But single family, I sometimes ask, do you know who's gonna build it? And I ask them because if the owner's gonna build it, I have to actually charge him differently, and I have to do the drawings slightly different than if a contractor's gonna do it. If a contractor's gonna do it, I'm protecting the owner from the contractor making a mistake. If an owner's gonna do it, I'm protecting the owner from himself not knowing how to build it. So I gotta issue a set of details completely different from one to the other. So, and we all get it. So I already have spoken about the 5 different things that are very critical that we start on, on article number 1 of this contract. Then we go to section 1.1.6, the owner's anticipated sustainable objective for the project. NCARB, I mean, no NCARB, the AIA has added this section in here. Why? Because we got to know what the goals are for the project when it comes to sustainability. Or the owner could say, I would like this project to be green, platinum certified. I would like this project to follow LEED certification, but not actually be certified. Just, or I would like this project. They could even put a goal that say, I would like this project to be net zero. I would like this project to be energy plus. Now, why is that important? Again, on a contract is important because it triggers a set of services or a package that may not be your typical, um, you know, basic services. So, and I'm always gonna talk about scope of work, scope creep, and money and time. Why? Even though there's other reasons why they do this, it's because I don't want to design a net zero home for the price of a non-net zero home. All right. So this is part of the initial information. This is why we need to know it. But at the end of the day, too, we might not even trigger a change order on this. But wouldn't you want to know from the get-go that you need to do an energy zero in the home? You wouldn't want to be detailing your regular from section walls and foundation walls, that aren't for a net zero project, or your regular roof pitch, that aren't for a net zero project or energy plus project. You wouldn't want to have to do that and then have to change it later on. You want to know from the very beginning, even if it doesn't trigger a change order. It will trigger a change order for you later on if you are to find out later, because that means that the drawings that were done are useless. So then section 1.1.6.1 says if the owner identifies a sustainable objective, the owner and architect shall complete and incorporate AI document E204 2017. Now, again, I'm not going to read this. There is another document, another attachment that gets put into this contract that establishes a criteria for sustainable projects and what the sustainable objectives are. And the AIA has that attachment. By the way, the E series of documents are these sort of electronic attachments that you put into the B101 or the B series. All right, so they get attached. Then section 1.1.7, the owner identifies the following representative in accordance with section 5.3. Now, there is this section where we already spoke about all of these different things that go into the contract, but there's this section that also says, well, if the owner is not to be found, who is the one that I'm going to ask any questions from? Like, the owner decided to go to Russia and they have no, signal there or whatever. They can't talk. You got to have a representative. So here is where they put the names, and it may be one or two persons that they put. Right now, it identifies one representative of the owner. Most of the time, we kind of become their representatives during construction because they don't know what the heck they're doing. Honestly, most of them don't know, and that's okay because they didn't go to school for architecture and construction. They shouldn't really know that much. So, um, so here they identify that person, all right? And then section 1.1.8, the persons of entity in addition to the owner representative is another list that will review architect submittals. It may be an owner's project manager. You probably have heard of the word OPM, owner's project manager. That's the person that will be taking care of review of submittals. It may be the same as section 1.1.7 or a different person, right? The 1.1.7 may be the owner's wife, but the owner wife doesn't even know how to read submittals. So the 1.1.8 might be somebody that is in the trade, that knows about construction, and they're retained, meaning they're getting paid to review these documents. And then we go to section 1.1.9, where you get the consultants that the owner shall retain. Shall is not like, yeah, you should have it if you feel like it. No, 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 no. For this project, the owner should have a geotechnical engineer. For this project, the owner should have a civil engineer and any other consultants that we've deemed necessary for the project. If they don't retain them and we retain them, we're compensated for that. All right, we and I will explain that later. But we got to make a cut out of everybody that we're dealing with. One, because we're contractually liable for them because we hired them, but two, we're coordinating with them, so we got to get paid for that, right? So we're working with them. There's a lot of stuff that happens on the background that the owners don't even know. And to be honest, it's good that they don't even know. Because when they get very nosy, and this is gonna go to YouTube eventually, it's gonna make it all into the public domain. But I'm telling you, when owners get very nosy about things, they begin opening a can of worms that they shouldn't sometimes. And I'm sorry to my homeowners that are listening out there, but I'm just telling you why. Why? Because they begin calling building inspectors and they begin calling people for things that they shouldn't be calling them for. It's kind of like waking up Hulk, right? Like you don't need Hulk, you just need me. Like you don't need like a monster that's gonna come and start asking a million questions. In fact, it's gonna cost you more when you call them. Why? Because you're calling them at the wrong time. Inspectors get called for inspections either because something is not being done right and there's not a permit being pulled. Somebody will call an inspector, a neighbor will call an inspector if they see that something is not being done properly or whatever. But like that's not for you on your own project to begin opening a can of worms. I love proactive homeowners. I love them. They're great. But be proactive as I coach you to be proactive. Know when you feel like it and how you feel like it. Like I'll tell you when to call the building inspector if you ever need to. I will tell you how you need to proceed about it. And in fact, I'd rather call them. Why? Because a 10-minute, 20-minute conversation with an inspector from you is the equivalent of a 2-minute conversation with me. I know what to ask, how to ask it, and why to ask it. So it's wasting everybody's time if a homeowner is calling them. And now I'm actually making homeowners, and not just homeowners, any client, be aware of one thing. Their time is worth money. Because sometimes they're like, oh, you know what? I'll give them a call. And I'm like, well, you giving them a call. What's your hourly rate? Give yourself an hourly rate. It's costing you money. You've already retained me for that for a flat fee. If your hourly rate is even $1 per hour and you speak with them for like a few minutes, I don't know, it might be 25 cents. You are double paying those 25 cents because you have already somebody that's supposed to be doing that. So why would you do it? It doesn't make any sense. I want people to start thinking like investors. Now, going back to this point, civil engineers, they're supposed to hire them. The technical engineers, they are supposed to hire them. Why is that? Miranda, will you answer that?
Because the owner owns the site and they are responsible for anything pertaining to the site.
That is correct. The owner owns the site, and any information regarding the site has got to be provided by the owner through the owner. So civil engineers are all about topographic stuff, and they are about the land and everything that's within the land. Septic systems and pipes coming in and coming out and things like that, and the electrical connections. They know where those things go, where those things are. The technical engineers, everything that happens on the ground, everything that happens with the soils. So, um, so that's where that is at. So now, with that being said, guys, I'm going to pause it here for a second, and I'm gonna get back with you in a minute. All right. So I'm gonna pause this one right now, and you guys can talk among yourselves, but I'm just gonna pause this video right now so that we continue with the next section in a minute. Okay. All right. So coming back and resuming where we left it. Is the screen being shared still? All good? Thumbs up. Good. All right. So we have already spoken about the article 1.1.9, which Miranda has explained why it's so important to that the owner gives us this. Then we also spoke about who the representatives are. Then we go to 1.1.11. The architect shall retain the consultants identified below. So, um, so the different consultants that we will be using, and these are the ones that relate to our good friend, the C401, boom, which is this contract right here. All right. So that outlines those consultants. They have their own names, structural engineer, mechanical engineer, but in the C401, they just say consultant. All right. It's between a contract between the architect and a consultant. So, and then you can outline what type of consultant they are, like what services they're supposed to be giving you. But they use that term, consultant. So structural engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, it all depends on the job. Consultants retain under supplemental services. Like for instance, there are some consultants that are like facade or fenestration consultants, or what is it they call it? Some that are like specialty consultants that deal with the specialty items. You can come up with some, a storefront consultant or something, total panel consultant, somebody that specializes in that, and they will put them in there. And then 1.1.12 says other initial information on which the agreement is based. Anything that's other than the ones that we have already spoken about. And then we go to 1.2. The owner and architect may rely on the initial information both parties However, recognize that initial information may materially change, and in that event, the owner and the architect shall appropriately adjust the architect's services, the schedule for the services, the architect's services, and the architect's compensation. Remember how I spoke to you about the fact that if the program changes, there may be changes to the cost, and we want to avoid scope creep. But also, if there's sustainability goals that we have that we didn't know about, or anything at all, like listen, the timeline might change. It may need to be faster. The delivery method might change. The owner may win the lottery, and also the scope of work may change because they want to do a tower now instead of a single family house. So, so there's like a lot of things that may change. And if they change, this changes. And because life changes, right? Nothing is perfect. Like life is not perfect. So they have this clause in here that tells us we need to adjust everything appropriately without, and I'm going to tell you later, without nullifying this contract. This contract's still valid. It's just saying we got to adjust it. All right. So, and then it goes, the owner shall adjust the owner's budget for the cost of the work and the owner's anticipated design and construction milestone as necessary to accommodate material changes in the initial information. So those are material information that needs to be changed. Okay. So then we have section 1.3. The parties shall agree upon protocols submitted governing the transmission and use of instruments of service or any other information or documentation in digital form. It depends how are we giving information to you, transmission of information, but also any other information. It could be electronic, instruments of service. It's just protocols, right? And the AIA has a document for that, E203. And it says the parties will use AIA document E203, 2013, Building Information Modeling and Digital Data Exhibit, to establish the protocols of the development, use, transmission, and exchange of digital data. Now, we would say that one. The E203 is not outlined on the AIA handbook. It doesn't say E203 is a document that we are supposed to study. Should I study for it? The answer is yes. Why? Because a document that is required, the B101, tells you that there is another document that's also important. Because of that, right? You got to know about it. So be familiar with the E203. Now, this document is not as huge one, and any of these other documents like the G202 and all of that, they're not huge, like super difficult. You just gotta know, like generally speaking, know the gist of it, like what is about, how is the procedure and so forth. We at Flow have created our own sort of like electronic transfer, and it just generally says, what, proceed with caution. If you're gonna use these documents, we're not responsible for any issues that happen with them. If you alter them or mess with them, also is used for this particular project only. You cannot use it in other projects and so forth. You got to pay for a license and things like that. We outline things like that. But this part 1.3 doesn't even talk about the licensing so much. It is about how to transmit this information. All right. Then 1.3.1 says any use of or reliance on all or portion of the building information model without agreement to protocols governing the use of and reliance on the information contained in the model, and without having those protocols set forth in AIA document E203 2013, building information modeling and digital data exhibit, and the requisite AIA document G202 2013, project building information modeling protocol form shall be at the use and or relying, oh my goodness, party sole risk. It's just saying proceed at your own risk. Kind of what I said before. If we haven't established a guideline, and if you're not following those guidelines, it's your problem, not mine. That's what I say. And then we go to Article 2, Architect's Responsibilities. Wow, so much to talk about initial information. Well, we got to talk about what the information is, initial information is, who the people are, and how do we transfer information, right? Like that's kind of like the gist of Article 1. Now we go to Article 2. This is, to me, where the money is. If you want to say, well, I studied everything, but I didn't study Article 2, then you're failing. Article 2 is like a must. I would say 70% of the target on here, okay? So Article 2, architect responsibilities, Section 2.1. Section 2.1 is critical. It establishes what we call the standard of care. Standard of care. Okay, but let's explain it. The architect shall provide professional services as set forth in this agreement. The architect represents that it is properly licensed in the jurisdiction where the project is located to provide the services required by this agreement, or shall cause such services to be performed by a properly licensed design professional. And it doesn't really establish the standard of care how I want it, but it's saying you're licensed. That's the first thing. 2.2. This is the standard of care. I'm sorry about that. So now let's do the drums. Standard of care, section 2.2. The architect shall perform its services consistent with the professional skill and care ordinarily provided by architects practicing in the same or similar locality under the same or similar circumstances. If you do something extraordinary, boo. Nope, it's not about extraordinary. Don't promise extraordinary. Don't promise the amazing super architect. You're supposed to be consistent with everybody else. All right? Apples to apples. Okay? It's not about how great of a designer you are. It's about being consistent with your design, with your services. Now, why is this important? This is to set appropriate expectations and limit your liability. All right? Insurance companies cover us for being ordinary, consistent, reasonable, prudent. Because when we go to court and we got to justify our services and how we did things the way we did them, we may have a pool of professionals around us. And they're going to call Mr. Architect peer reviewer and say, would you have done the same thing under the same and similar circumstances? And if the answer is no, by all the parties involved, it means you have exceeded your limitation of liabilities and you have exceeded what the standard of care is. This is not a problem with exceeding your standard of care. There's a problem with you falling short of your standard of care. Does it make sense, Aigo? Like all architects, let's say, but most architects will provide an egress window in a bedroom for a single family project. If you haven't put an egress window in your project and you get sued because you have not put an egress window in your project on that bedroom, they're going to ask other architects and they're going to say, will you have put an egress window? And they all going to say, duh, that's the code. We all know the code. You're supposed to put an egress window in the bedroom, right? Then you're falling short. Now, if the opposite, you do the opposite. You could be sued for the opposite as well. And you say, well, Darwin, wait. You're telling me that I could be sued for putting too many egress windows in a bedroom? Yes. Because if the code says you got to provide at least one and you provide two, you're incurring an additional cost to the owner. Does it make sense? So you may be sued for the additional $1,000 on that egress window. That's a lot bigger than what they needed it to be for light and ventilation. Does it make sense, everybody? And then you're saying, well, Darwin. Yeah, Prasanna, Miranda?
Yep.
No. So then you're saying, Darwin, so then you're telling me that we could be sued
Yes.
for going above and beyond and for falling short? Yes, you could be sued. Because you're outperforming the code, you're outperforming what the thing says, and you're costing the owner more. At least let him know, though, right? From the beginning. Say, listen, to be safe, we're going to put 2. Now, that first paragraph is saying what our standard of care is. That's section 2.2, that first sentence. Then he says the architect shall perform its services as expeditiously and as is consistent with such professional skill and care and the orderly progress of the project. Now he's just saying be as fast as you should be, as any other architect should be. Being too fast could be a problem. Being too slow could be a problem. You're like, Darwin, what's going on here? So you're telling me like there's a range for where I should be? Yeah, like in baseball, there is a square and it says that strike zone. You got to be within the strike zone. Not up there, well, that's a ball. Not up here, you're gonna hit the baseball player. You gotta be within that strike zone, right? Generally speaking. Now, if you're not gonna do that, right? What's the thing you should do? Anybody, if you're not following the standard of care, what should you do? Anybody? Nobody?
It should be written in the contract. I'm just guessing.
You should let them know. You should let them know that you are not following, you should let them know that you're doing something a little bit outside of the box. You should let them know, hey, listen, what we're doing here, it's not something we've ever done before. And we're probably not going to be like any other architects in that way. We're probably not going to be putting one egress window. We're going to put 3 because we believe such as, like, whatever it is that you're doing in timeline. Like, okay, listen, we're going to do this project in a day. No other architect will do it in a day. We're doing it because such and such and such and such, and we're going to be compensated accordingly and understand the risks and liabilities and rewards of that 1 day service. Let them know. Now, I don't recommend it. just stay within the standard of care. Stay within the strike zone, okay? Stay within that hot spot. You don't want to go too far out. Now, section 2.3 says the architect shall identify a representative authorized to act on behalf of the architect with respect to the project. Anybody knows who that representative typically is?
It could be a project manager.
Typically is a project manager, and they may not be licensed. They may not even be an architect, right? They may be a 50-year-old guy that seems to know about the profession, was licensed once upon a time, lost his license, and didn't care to get it back. And they know a lot about construction and architecture, and they're just managing the project. They are project managers. So you outline that on this contract, all right? So the first 3 sections right here have already told us a lot. They've told us, 1, you cannot do this project if you're not an architect. 2, you got to follow the standard of care for architecture. 3, you got to designate somebody that may or may not be licensed to be able to represent you on the project. Okay? Get that?
Yeah, standard of care is really important.
When Miranda says the standard of care is really important, it's because it's critical. Can you repeat that again?
Standard of care is very important. That one little article there means a lot. So we do not guarantee anything. We don't say we're going to complete something to 100% or perfection or beauty. It's standard of care.
Yeah.
That she already got on the really, really, really hot spot right there. You guys heard that she said we're not guaranteeing or putting warranties on perfection. We're not guaranteeing certain type of like 100%. So if you say my drawings are 100% complete, are you meeting the standard of care or getting away from the standard of care?
Meeting the standard of care.
Nope.
No.
Your family.
No?
Nope. Your drawings can never be 100% complete. 100% complete means perfect. Are your drawings perfect?
No.
No. Yeah.
Never say 100% complete. Now, have you guys used the term 100% construction documents in your drawings?
Yes.
And why are you doing there?
That means that they've been complete to the level of issuing for construction.
But you are violating the standard of care with that term. Every time you use the term 100% construction documents, they are violating that. That term is wrong, and we've all used it to some extent. Well, here at Flow, we don't use it. We just call it permit set or construction set. We don't say it's 100%. The reason is people get paid on like percentages of finalizing a project sometimes. So they're like 50% schematic design, 100% schematic design, and then they issue a payment. My jobs are not in the $1 million like architecture services and design fees. So we're not like worried about getting paid. We divide the payments in like 3 or 4. And here it is, 4, boom, 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 and we've determined what those steps are within our measuring bracket. But That is wrong. You should not be using those numbers, 100%, 50%, because there's no way of really knowing that something is 50% done or not. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just ingrained in our industry now, and contractors like it, especially in like a design build.
But we don't do it. For the AREs, forget about 100% complete. If you see anything like the architect has submitted 100% complete construction documents, when he, check for that apply. One, architect has exceeded his standard of care. Two, the documents are ready for construction and the contractor should promptly begin construction. Three, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, he has exceeded his standard of care. Yeah, the contractor can begin construction with it, but you have exceeded your standard of care. You don't use those terms, okay? All right, so let's go to section 2.4. Except with the owner's knowledge and consent, the architect shall not engage in any activity or accept any employment, interest, or contribution that would reasonably appear to compromise the architect's professional judgment with respect to this project. What is that telling us, Miranda?
Be an ethical architect.
So I'm doing my drawings for the owner. In the middle of the drawings, contractor comes over and says, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna bid on that job. I'm gonna give you a kickback of, I don't know, $2,000. You know what? Let's change the roof detail here so that I can make that work. Let's change the wall section here so that I can make the budget work with my fee. And I'm gonna bid on the job and I'm gonna get the job. And you get your $2,000. Is that violating Article 2.4?
To me, it didn't sound like it.
What?
I mean, like, it just felt like the architect.
Prasanna, I just told you that contractor is gonna give you $2,000 on the side, and he's telling you.
It is violating the ethics, but also what you just read felt like the architect should not accept any other work that might like jeopardize this project. The when I read this sentence, the way I felt like was like, oh, okay, now I'm moving to Europe and I cannot do your drawings anymore or something like that. That's what I understood.
No. It has nothing to do with that, Prasanna. Like, I'm gonna read it again. Except with the owner's knowledge and consent, the architect shall not engage in any activity or accept any employment, interest, or contribution that would reasonably appear to compromise the architect's professional judgment. You could be in China. Doesn't matter. It's not about moving away with respect to this project. It's about judgment.
That makes sense. Yep.
And I very clearly stated that the contractor is gonna give you $2,000 and he's telling you to change your standard details, your wall section detail and roof detail so that he can make the budget work. Are you working for the contractor or are you working for the owner? At that point, you are already violating your trust, your ethical mandate to protect the health, safety, and welfare of your owner. Right?
Yeah. And another example is, let's say you're the architect for one grocery store and you have a competitor grocery store. You have to let that owner that you have a contract with know for that first grocery store A that you're going to potentially go after grocery store B. If they do not agree to it, then you can't be the architect for grocery store B. If that makes sense.
I quite did not get it, actually. Are you saying, like, let's say Walmart is competing with CVS for some reason, or Walgreens, Walgreens is competing with CVS. If I'm working with CVS, I need CVS permission to work with Walgreens, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what Article 2.4 means. You would have to let CVS know that you potentially are going after a project with Walgreens or Walmart or whatever.
Why is that? Well, it's a conflict of interest. Memorize that word, conflict of interest. One thing, and this is another example. Well, I had an attorney. The attorney represent me and a significant other in the transaction when we were selling a property. We sold the property, right? The attorney got paid. Me and my significant other got paid, and then later on, the significant other and I split ways. She went left and I went right, and I called that attorney and I say, "Hey, listen, will you represent me on a case against that person that I'm dealing with?" And the attorney said, "No, I cannot." And I was like, "Why?" "Because I represented you on the sale of that other asset, then it would appear as though I was representing you on the sale of that asset with hidden intentions as to going after your partner, which I was representing at that time because both of you were my clients. So there is a conflict of interest there. And I ethically cannot do that. That right there and then, and this attorney is a good friend of mine, that right there and then told me she's a trustworthy professional. She did exactly the right thing. Was I happy about it? Nah, but she did exactly what she was supposed to do. So that was another example. But then again, what Miranda said is the same thing. Hey, listen, I've been working with CVS. Walgreens calls me. And now, by the way, CVS and Walgreens, I think, are owned by the Walmart people, Wall Street people. Is the same people, I think. So it may be that it's okay, but we don't know that though. So we still have to disclose it. Hey, listen, Walgreens, I've been working with CVS, and I know the ins and outs of their business strategies and how they design their buildings. And unfortunately, it would compromise my judgment to do this for you. So out of loyalty for Walgreens or CVS or either or, I cannot do services for you. Now, hey, wait a minute, Darwin. So you're saying that if CVS comes on and Walgreens comes on and Walmart comes on and everybody comes on, you're not gonna work with any of them? No, 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 no. I'm just telling you right now, one course of action. The other course of action is consent. If CVS gives you consent to proceed with work with Walgreens, that's okay. You can work with Walgreens, and Walgreens is okay working with you, even though you're working with CVS. Both of them are, I would like both of them to be aware. Now, chances are, I'm sorry, if you're working with such a big competitor like that, you probably have already signed a non-compete agreement and a non-disclosure agreement. So you cannot like just use their plans for another like you can't do a lot of things. You're limited. All right.
Jargon, a
Yeah.
question. I don't know if it fits inside of this 2.4 article, but speaking of the contractor example, what if it's the kind of an opposite situation? Let's say we, as an architect, we specify something in the project, and then the contractor comes to us or to the owner and says like, "Oh, you specified this, but I think, oh, I believe throughout my experience, the option B would be a better thing." Can this happen?
Now,
I mean, I know it
when are we doing
happens
this?
on the.
Is this being done during construction? Is this being done before construction? Have you known this
No,
contractor prior? Like, I want to know when, because there are things that you can do at certain points, right, Miranda? You got what I'm talking about, probably. Is that clear?
yeah, but I imagine
Um,
it could happen throughout the bidding process or even the construction. The construction, I'm sure that it happens a lot because we know that contractors are always trying to change everything we specify. But I mean, for the better, it's not so common. But
Now, during construction, substitutions and changes may be allowed with approval by the owner. And if our contracts allow it, if our contracts let us do that, that may be allowed. Now, the Article 2.4 is not talking so much about that. Now, if you're
mhm.
talking during the bidding, the appropriate course of action, at that time you have no bias. The drawings have already been issued, but you get the question from the contractor, then you issue that. If it does a design bid built on a public job, most likely you will issue an sort of addendum
Oh,
or
okay.
addenda to everybody.
Mhm.
You want to say, you don't even need to credit who said it. You can just say,
Yeah.
"It's come to our attention that substitution of the tile floor A for such and such may be an appropriate accepted substitution." All of them will do it. Let them all
Oh,
do it. That's not making a judgment change. Now, when would that be a problem? Well, guess what? You tell that contractor directly by email, not by an addenda, which an addenda is issued to the public. It's a public thing to all the bidders that have expressed their desires to be involved in the project or have already been involved in the bidding process. If you just reply to that contractor and say, yeah, that's an acceptable change, go for it. You have already compromised your judgment, but you also have already kind of messed up with the democratic process of bidding, right? Because you have favorites. You cannot have favorites. You can't have
oh,
favorites during construction.
gotcha.
Now,
Thank you.
here's so I was explaining another sample of that. So this 2.4, it really is just protecting us from having a clouded, biased, motive-oriented um, mindset or process. All right. And even if those contractors or those people aren't involved, if we're working catering towards a contractor, right, in our drawings, not because we are doing what we believe is best for the project, not because that wall section or wall assembly is what we want to do, then you're being motivated by something else. And if you're motivated by something else, whether you're getting paid or not doesn't matter. If you're motivated by somebody else outside of your own judgment as an architect, you got to let the owner know about it. And if you don't let the owner know about it, you're trespassing the section 2.4. You're breaking that rule. Why? Because you are catering towards somebody other than your owner at this point. Okay, you got to work for that owner, for that particular client. That's your client. You're losing your client attorney privileges or client agent privileges because right now you're breaching that thing. All right. Now, would you say, well, Darwin, well, I learned about this wall assembly because I did a project and such contractor showed me how bad that was. No, that's different. That's the lessons learned. You're not working for that contractor. But if you in your mind even think that maybe this contractor might be bidding on this job, you're already kind of catering towards that contract. All right. Now, all I'm saying here is let the owner know and let them approve it. You can get a kickback from a contractor, and I'm gonna say it right now publicly. You could get a kickback from a contractor, like kickback might be they send you a gift, like Actually, I used to work at a firm where they will get. They did a lot of projects for this construction company, and I'm not gonna disclose the name. Not for the construction company, but with the construction company. Like they would, invite them to bid and things like that. And it wasn't a public bidding process. It was more like they selected them themselves, and the client understood that that was the process, so that was okay. But there was an unethical little part on this, and it was the fact that they will get a Christmas basket every Christmas. I would see a Christmas basket coming from this construction company, and I'm like, that's a problem. Now, why is that a problem? Like, is it bad that the contractor is being thankful to the architect? No, it's not bad. But I cannot accept that. I cannot accept that because that starts to compromise my judgment. That starts to compromise me as an architect. Okay. So that starts like if you start even going out with the contractor at night and getting drinks with them, is there a problem with that? Yeah, they may be. I'm sorry. Why? Because you guys are working on this very serious project, $1 million project. Like, I'm sorry, you shouldn't really be buddies. If you're doing integrated product delivery, maybe that's a different case. That definitely is a different case, a different scenario. But in this is a contractual thing, and I don't want anything to jeopardize it. I don't want anything to now take it with a grain of salt. So long as everybody knows about it, that's all good. Everybody knows about it. You're all good. Everybody knows that you're working with this contractor. It's all good. All right. Everybody knows that. If you're getting a kickback, and I said it again, if you get a kickback, you should tell your owner, hey, listen, Every time I refer you to these contractors send me a $50 referral fund. Okay, sounds good. Me, you know what I tell them? I tell the owners, proceed with caution. I'm giving you this list. It's a non-inclusive, all-inclusive list, and I don't vouch for any of them. And I tell them, contractors have gone, in my life, I've seen it, that contractors have gone from amazing to shit overnight. And I don't want to be involved with that. So I can only vouch for me as a contractor if I was to ever do a construction project. I cannot be vouching for anybody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Got it. So we spent a lot of time on that section 2.4. Do you see why it's so difficult to go through this whole B101 in one sit? It's just impossible.
Yeah.
It's just impossible. Because all of these articles are very important. They may all show up. So let's try to get as far as we can. And I think I've tried to go through the B101 before and I recorded it. Please, will you mind reminding me that we are ending on like section 2.5 today or 2.5.1? Put it on your notes and remind me for tomorrow so that we can continue from there. So I'm gonna continue now to section 2.5. The architect shall maintain the following insurance until termination of this agreement. If any of the requirements set forth below are in addition to the types and limits the architect normally maintains, the owner shall pay the architects as set forth in section 11.9. You got to have insurance. That's what the AIA is saying. You are actually required to have insurance by most states to be like a company to run your business legally. Some people don't even have any insurance. What it really does is that they are personally liable. Like you get sued, your insurance not covering, you lose your house, you lose your cars, you lose everything you've got, your bank accounts, everything. You got no shelter. In most projects, that's not gonna fly. You gotta have some insurance. Now, if your insurance is supposed to have $1 million and your client is requiring you a $2 million, like 1 million plus one umbrella or whatever they call it, the owner gotta pay the difference of the premium. Like they gotta pay that upgrade charge for that insurance. Okay, and that's what it's saying here. And then the architect shall maintain, and it's throughout the whole project. If you don't have it for some reason at some point, you gotta let them know. You gotta let them know. All right. The architect shall maintain the following insurance until termination of this agreement. Oh, that's already I spoke about. 2.5.1 commercial general liability. So I want you guys to be familiar with that term, commercial general liability, and that's an amount. And then aggregate bodily injury and property damage. Understand that. 2.5.2 automobile liability insurance. That's another one. Then there's a workers' comp, employer's liability, general liability. This is a good one. General liability. Okay. You can read this yourself. There's a professional liability. This is one that I really, really, really want you to know about. Okay. That's the one that protects you as a professional. All right. These other ones protect you from things happening, like workers' comp, things happening at the workplace. Employer's liability, again, it has to do with that, with people during work, accidents and things like that. The automobile liability is for your car, like company car and things like that. Commercial is like your office. It protects your office from things happening on the office. And any additional insurance. And you got to provide insurance certificates. To the insurance certificates, I have copies of them. I can show them to you next time. You can require them, and you can put the owner as an additional insured, like your project owner. And I'm gonna end it here. So we're gonna continue Article 3 next tomorrow. But I'll touch upon this insurance a little bit more tomorrow. How does that sound?
Good.
Perfect. So thank you so much, guys. Now homework. I gotta leave some homework for you. Read the whole contract. Please read the whole contract. Become familiar. Read the C41 as well. Okay. And then become familiar with the different contracts as I explained to you on this document, the document that I'm showing you here. I know it's a whole lot of stuff, and I might have skipped through some things, but we'll touch base. Put down some questions, ask them tomorrow, and we'll continue tomorrow.